My daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye across the dinner table and said, "We're taking the kids to Italy for 2 weeks. Just immediate family. You understand, right?" My son didn't even glance up from his phone. I set down my fork, smiled, and told her of course I understood. What she didn't know was that I'd be checking into the same villa 3 days before they arrived, not as a guest, as the man who'd owned it for the past 11 years. Before I tell you how it ended, do me a favor and hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments what state or country you're listening from. I read every single one. The Tuesday before all this started, I was standing in my kitchen at 6 in the morning making the same breakfast I'd made for 43 years. 2 eggs, over medium, whole wheat toast, lightly buttered. Black coffee from the percolator my wife Eleanor bought us the year Reagan got shot. The percolator still works. Eleanor doesn't. She passed in 2019, and most mornings I still set out 2 mugs before I remember. My name is Edmund. Most people call me Ed. I'm 67 years old, and to my son and his wife, I'm the embarrassing father who lives in the 1970s ranch house in a tired suburb of Cleveland and wears the same tan windbreaker to every family event. They're not entirely wrong about the windbreaker. Eleanor picked it out for me at a Sears closeout sale in 1998, and I've never seen the point of replacing something that still keeps the rain off. What they were entirely wrong about was the rest. The dinner that started everything happened on a Tuesday in late June. I'd invited them over because my granddaughter Penelope had just turned 8, and I'd missed her birthday party 2 weekends earlier. Not because I wanted to miss it, because my daughter-in-law Brittany had told me the venue had a strict guest count and they were already at capacity. I found out later from Penelope herself, sitting on my lap a week later, that there had been 6 empty seats. I made pot roast. Eleanor's recipe, the one with the red wine and the pearl onions, she used to caramelize for 45 minutes, until they turned the color of dark honey. I'd practiced it 3 times in the months after her funeral, until I got it right. Cooking it always took me back to her, to our kitchen, to the way she'd hum while she stirred. That night, I made it because I wanted my son to taste his mother again. I wanted him to remember. He arrived 40 minutes late. His wife Brittany came in first, in a white linen jumpsuit and gold sandals, her sunglasses still pushed up on top of her head, though it was nearly 7 in the evening. My son Trevor followed her, already on his phone, mumbling apologies about traffic that we all knew was a lie. The kids, Penelope and little Maxwell, ran straight to the living room to play with a wooden train set I'd kept in the hall closet for them since they were toddlers. Brittany walked into my dining room and did that thing she always does, where her eyes sweep across the space like she's pricing it for an estate sale. She touched the back of one of Eleanor's dining chairs the way you might touch something dead at the side of the road. "Ed, this is so sweet of you," she said in that voice. The one that sounds like sugar but isn't. I'd set the table with Eleanor's good china. The white plates with a cobalt blue rim, the ones we'd registered for at our wedding in 1981. I'd polished the silver. I'd cut peonies from the bush by the back fence and put them in the cut crystal vase Eleanor's mother had given us. I'd opened a bottle of Cabernet I'd been holding on to for 2 years, since Trevor's last birthday, when I'd hoped he might come over for dinner, and he hadn't. Trevor sat down at the head of the table where I'd placed his name card. He didn't notice the name card. He just sat down and started scrolling. "Trev, honey, put the phone away," Brittany said. But the way she said it was for my benefit, not his. "1 sec," he said. "Big thing happening at work." There was no big thing. Trevor sells commercial insurance. Big things in commercial insurance happen on Wednesday mornings, not Tuesday evenings. But I let it go. I always let it go. Brittany spread her napkin across her lap. She picked up the Cabernet, examined the label like she was going to find something wrong with it, and poured for herself. Then she poured for Trevor. Then she set the bottle down on her side of the table and started telling him about the school auction she was chairing. I watched my own hand reach across the table for the bottle, then pull back. I sat there with my empty glass, the host of my own dinner, and I waited. I waited the whole meal. The kids came in. They ate quickly, the way kids do, and Penelope kissed me on the cheek and asked if she could go play with the trains again, And I said yes, and I cut Maxwell's pot roast into smaller pieces because Brittany was busy on her own phone now. The kids left. The room got quieter. I poured myself water from the pitcher. That's when Brittany brought up Italy. So we wanted to tell you in person, she said, in the tone people use when they've already made a decision and are pretending it's a conversation. We're doing 2 weeks at a villa in Tuscany this August. Just us and Trevor's parents. I mean, my parents. Sorry. You know what I meant. She laughed at her own slip. Trevor laughed too, finally looking up. It's a really limited family thing, Trevor said. The villa only sleeps 8, and we wanted Penelope and Max to have time with Brittany's mom and dad. I nodded. What part of Tuscany? Outside Siena, Brittany said. Place called Casavecchia di Montelupo. It's incredible. My friend Whitney went there last summer, said it was the best vacation of her life. I felt something in my chest do the thing it sometimes does. Not pain, not exactly. More like a door clicking shut. That sounds wonderful, I said. When do you fly out? August 14th, Trevor said. Back the 28th. And Brittany started, and I watched her arrange her face into something that was supposed to look like regret. We just don't have the budget to bring you along, Ed. The villa rates went up this year, and with the kids' summer programs, you understand. I understood that they'd just bought a Range Rover. I understood that Trevor's bonus the previous March had been $98,000 before taxes, because he called me drunk one night to brag about it. I understood that Brittany's parents owned 3 condos in Naples, Florida, and would not have needed the help. Of course, I said. And honestly, Brittany said, leaning forward like she was about to share a confidence, we just need a real break. Not from you, but from everything. The kids barely see Trevor's. I mean, my parents, they're getting older, and we want to make memories. Trevor made eye contact with me for the first time all evening. There was something in his eyes I didn't recognize. Something cold I'd never put there. Dad, he said, we just need some space. The kids need space. You're around a lot. I was around a lot because I picked Penelope up from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because Brittany had her tennis and her wine club. I was around a lot because I drove Maxwell to his speech therapy on Mondays. I was around a lot because Eleanor had told me in the last week of her life, when she could still talk, that I had to stay close to our boy, that he was going to need me, that she was sorry she wouldn't be there to do it herself. I understand, I said. I stood up. I cleared the plates. They didn't help. I rinsed the dishes and stacked them in the sink, and I came back to the dining room, and I sat down, and I asked them about Penelope's swim lessons, and I listened to Brittany complain about the swim coach for 15 minutes, and then I walked them to the door and I hugged my grandkids and I waved them off down the driveway. Then I went back inside and I sat in Eleanor's side of the bed in the dark, still wearing my windbreaker, and I cried for the first time in 3 years. Around 2 a.m, I got up and went to my office. There's a room in the back of my house that I keep locked. Trevor used to ask about it when he was a teenager, and I told him it was just paperwork, and he believed me. The way kids believe their parents about boring things. The lock is real. The paperwork is real. But the paperwork is not what Trevor thinks it is. I unlocked the door, sat down at the desk, and turned on the lamp. The walls are lined with file cabinets and a single-framed photograph of Eleanor at 26, holding a real estate sign in front of our first investment property, a duplex in Akron we'd bought in 1984 for $22,000. She'd been pregnant with Trevor. She didn't know it yet. I opened the laptop on the desk and signed into my company portal. Bramwell Heritage Holdings, LLC. I'm the sole member. The company owns interest, full or partial, in 11 properties across 4 countries. 2 of them are in Italy. One is a converted monastery in Umbria. The other is a 16th-century stone farmhouse in the hills outside Siena, in the commune of Montelupo. I'd bought it in 2014, 3 months before Eleanor's diagnosis. We'd planned to retire there. She'd taken Italian classes at the community college for 2 years preparing for it. She had a notebook full of vocabulary, half of it stained with the watercolors she used to paint with on Sunday afternoons. The notebook is in my desk drawer. I can't open it. I keep it there because I can't open it and I can't throw it away. After Eleanor died, I couldn't bring myself to sell the farmhouse. Couldn't bring myself to go there either, so I leased it through a property management company in Florence, who marketed it to American and German tourists for between 9 and 14,000 euros a week, depending on the season. The farmhouse generates about $190,000 a year in net revenue. It pays for itself, the staff, and a sizable portion of the cost in my life. The property is listed on the management company's website under the name they gave it after I declined to use Eleanor's first choice. I couldn't bear to see her name on a tourism website. The name they chose was Casa Vecchia di Montelupo. I sat at the desk for a long time. I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the night Eleanor and I had stood on the terrace of that farmhouse, looking down the slope toward the olive grove, and she'd said this was where she wanted to grow old with me. I thought about the way Trevor had looked at me when he said, "You're around a lot." Like I was a dog that kept sniffing at the door. I thought about Penelope, who still climbed into my lap, and Maxwell, who saved his Halloween candy to share with me, and how my own son's wife had decided I wasn't family enough for a vacation in a house I'd bought to grow old in, with a woman they both stopped mentioning. Then I called my property manager in Florence. It was 9 in the morning over there. Stefano picked up on the second ring, and I told him in my decent but not fluent Italian that I was coming to the property in August, that I was taking my own residence there from August 11th through the end of the month, that the standing reservation for the 14th through the 28th, under the name Brittany Whitcomb, would need to be honored as a guest reservation rather than a renter reservation. Stefano paused. "Signor, this is an unusual arrangement." "I'm aware," I said. "They will be very surprised." "I'm counting on that," I said. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I made coffee in Eleanor's percolator, and I watched the sun come up over the dogwood tree she'd planted in 2003. Then I started planning. The next 6 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the sad widower father, the man Brittany called Ed and Trevor called Dad. I picked up Penelope on Tuesday and Thursday. I took Maxwell to speech therapy. I sent Trevor a check for $300 on the 4th of July when he mentioned offhandedly that the back deck stain was peeling, because I'd been raising my son for 36 years and I didn't know how to stop, even when he wasn't looking. By night, in the locked room, I was someone else. I called Stefano 3 times a week. I had my staff in Italy, 2 housekeepers and a groundsman named Renzo, prepare the property for an extended owner stay. I had the master suite on the upper floor, the one Eleanor and I had picked out together, repainted in the soft green she'd wanted. I had Renzo dig out a crate of her things I'd shipped to the farmhouse the year after she died, and never opened. Her cookbooks, her watercolors, the tea set her grandmother had brought from Wales in 1923. He didn't ask questions. He'd known Eleanor for one summer in 2014, and he'd cried at the news of her death harder than my own son had at her funeral. I called my attorney in Cleveland. His name is Lawrence, and he's been handling my affairs for 19 years. I had him draft updated estate documents, the house in Cleveland, the rental properties in Akron, the commercial real estate in Tampa, the equity stake in a hotel in Charleston, the farmhouse in Montelupo. All of it was being moved into a revocable trust, with terms I dictated to him over a long Saturday afternoon. The new trust named my granddaughter Penelope as primary beneficiary in a structured payout that wouldn't begin until she was 35. It named my grandson Maxwell as secondary. It made absolutely no provision for my son or his wife. Lawrence asked me, at the end of that meeting, if I was sure. "Larry," I said, "I'm the surest I've ever been." He nodded slowly. "What did they do, Ed?" I thought about it. "They made me invisible." He didn't ask anything else. I had Lawrence draw up one more document, a letter to be delivered to my son in the event of my death, explaining everything, the companies, the trust, the reasons. I sealed it, signed it, and put it in his vault. I booked my flight to Florence for August 10th, business class on Lufthansa, paid for from a personal account my son had no idea existed. I packed 2 suitcases, linen shirts I bought 10 years ago in a shop in Rome with Eleanor and never worn since. A summer suit. The tan windbreaker, just to spite myself, because I was going to be wearing it when my son walked through the door. The night before I flew out, Trevor called me. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. We're heading out to Italy on the 14th. Want me to swing by and grab your spare key in case the mail piles up?" I sat on the porch with the phone pressed to my ear, looking at the dogwood tree in the moonlight. "That's all right, son. The neighbor kid does my mail." "You sure? I don't mind. I'm sure." There was a pause. "Okay, well, we'll send you pictures, all right?" "Sounds good," I said. "Have a wonderful trip." I hung up the phone and I sat there for a long time. He hadn't asked how I was doing. He hadn't asked what I'd be doing for the 2 weeks his family was away. He hadn't asked anything at all. He'd called to make sure his mail wouldn't pile up, and that was the entirety of his interest in me, his only living parent, on the eve of his vacation. I didn't feel angry. That was the strange thing. I felt clear, cold and clear, like a winter morning when the wind has stopped and you can see the breath of every animal across a field of snow. I flew out the next afternoon. Florence in August is a furnace. I rented a car at the airport and drove south on the autostrada, then east into the hills. And after about an hour, I turned onto the gravel road that climbs through cypresses up to the property. The farmhouse came into view the way it always had, the way Eleanor had first seen it in the photographs Stefano sent us in 2014, with the apricot stucco and the terracotta roof and the wisteria that climbed the south wall in violet ropes. Renzo was waiting at the gate. He'd grown grayer since I last saw him in person. He'd been here through everything, watching this house age the way he was aging, watching it get used by strangers I'd never met. He embraced me like a brother and said something in fast Tuscan dialect I only half caught, but I caught the part that mattered. He said it had been too long. The two housekeepers, Donata and her sister Marisa, had laid out a simple supper on the terrace. Bread, tomatoes from the garden, a pecorino from the farm down the hill, a bottle of Vernaccia. They'd lit candles. The sun was setting over the olive grove, turning the leaves silver and then gold, and I sat at the long wooden table where Eleanor and I had once eaten this same supper, and I felt her there with me as clearly as if she'd just stepped out for a moment to get something from the kitchen. I stayed 3 days alone in the house before they came. I walked the property. I sat in the chair on the terrace where Eleanor had once read aloud to me from a book of Mary Oliver poems. I went into the kitchen and I opened her Italian cookbooks for the first time, and I let Donata teach me how to make ribollita the way her grandmother had taught her. And I cried in the kitchen of a 16th century farmhouse in Tuscany over a pot of cabbage soup, and Donata didn't say a word. She just put her hand on my shoulder and let me cry. On the morning of August 14th, I dressed carefully. The cream-colored linen shirt, the light slacks, loafers. My hair freshly cut by Renzo's barber in the village. I put the windbreaker on over the top of all of it. I looked, I think, like a man who'd lived a long, comfortable life. Which I had, even if my son had never bothered to look. I sat in the small office off the kitchen, where the property's computer sits, and I waited. The car pulled up at 4:32 in the afternoon, a black Mercedes van I'd hired from the airport service. Through the office window, I watched them spill out onto the gravel, all of them. Trevor first, in cargo shorts and a polo. Brittany in a flowing maxi dress, her oversized sunglasses on, already complaining about something to the driver. Brittany's mother, a thin, sharp woman named Gloria I'd met exactly twice in my life, in a sun hat the size of a small parasol. Brittany's father, Hal, a barrel-chested man who'd once told me at Penelope's baptism that real men don't cook. The kids tumbling out behind them. Penelope saw the wisteria first. She ran toward it, 8 years old and full of wonder, and put her face right into the flowers. Maxwell trailed behind, dragging a small backpack with a dinosaur on it. I waited. Donata greeted them at the door. She'd been instructed to play the role of greeting housekeeper, which was technically accurate since she was the housekeeper and she was greeting them. She led them inside, showed them to their rooms, took their drink orders. Standard hospitality. Brittany was already on her phone, photographing the entry hall and posting it. I stayed in the office. I had a glass of vernaccia and a small plate of olives. I waited. The plan was simple. I'd let them settle in. Let them have an evening. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they were on the vacation of their lives. Then, in the morning, I'd appear. Around 7 in the evening, they came down to the terrace for dinner. Donut to serve them. They drank my wine, ate my food, took photographs of the sunset over my olive grove, and at one point I heard Brittany say, loudly, that this was so much better than that depressing dinner Ed put together back in June. Trevor laughed. He laughed. I sat in the office with the door cracked half an inch, and I listened to my son laugh at his dead mother's recipe. I went to bed that night in the master suite with the green walls, and I lay awake until almost 3. Not in pain, not in rage. In a strange, settled kind of peace, like a man who has finally accepted what he has to do. I came down the back stairs at 7:45 the next morning. The family was already at the breakfast table on the terrace. Penelope and Maxwell were eating cornetti. Trevor was on his phone. Brittany was telling Gloria about her plans to drive to a winery that afternoon. Hal was reading an English-language newspaper Donata had brought him from the village. I walked out onto the terrace in my linen shirt with a cup of espresso in my hand. Penelope saw me first. Grn pa. She leapt up so fast she knocked over a glass of orange juice. She came running across the flagstones, threw herself into my arms, and held on tight. Maxwell was right behind her, both arms wrapped around my legs. The adults at the table had gone completely still. Trevor's mouth was open. His phone was halfway to the table, suspended. Brittany had gone the color of skim milk. Gloria looked from Brittany to me and back, her sun hat tilted at a confused angle. Hal said with that rumbling baritone of his, "What in the hell is going on?" I set down my espresso and I picked up Maxwell. He weighs maybe 40 pounds. He smelled like sunscreen and chocolate from a cornetto. I kissed the top of his head and I looked at my son. "Good morning, son." "Dad," Trevor said. His voice came out thin. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I'm having breakfast," I said. "How did you?" Brittany started, and then she stopped, because her brain had not yet caught up with what was happening. "Did you follow us?" "No," I said. "Then how?" she began again. I sat down in the empty chair at the head of the table. I put Maxwell on my lap. Penelope crawled into the chair next to mine and laid her cheek against my arm. "Brittany," I said calmly, "I own this house." Hal made a sound, a low sound, like a man who'd just been kicked in the ribs. Trevor said, "What?" "I bought this property in 2014, I said. "Your mother and I bought it together. We were planning to retire here. After your mother passed, I leased it through a management company in Florence. The villa you booked, Casa Vecchia di Montelupo, it's mine." The silence that followed was the deepest I have ever experienced in my life. I could hear the bees in the lavender by the wall. I could hear a bird across the valley. I could hear Maxwell's quiet breathing on my chest. "That's not possible," Brittany said. "We rented this from a company in Italy. From a real company." "You did," I said. "Bramwell Heritage Holdings." "That's me. I'm Bramwell Heritage Holdings." Trevor stood up so fast his chair scraped backward across the stones. "This is some kind of joke." "It's not a joke." "Dad, you live in a ranch house in Parma Heights. You drive a 2011 Buick. You wear that jacket." He gestured at the windbreaker I'd taken off and laid across the back of the chair. "Yes," I said, "I do. You don't own a villa in Italy. I own 7. Brittany made a small sound, like a dog that had just been stepped on by accident. "What are you talking about?" Trevor said. His face was changing color in a way I hadn't seen since he was 12, and got caught lying about a window he'd broken. "What do you mean you own 7? "I mean, I own 7 properties through Bramwell Heritage Holdings. 2 in Italy, 1 in France, 3 rental properties in Ohio, a commercial building in Tampa. I have an equity stake in a hotel in Charleston. I have a few other things." "You're lying." "I'm not." How? Trevor said, and I watched his throat work. How? Where did? Where did the money? Your mother and I bought our first property in 1984, I said. A duplex in Akron. $22,000. We managed it ourselves on weekends. We bought another one in 1989. Another one in 1993. Your mother had a head for it. She was the best partner I could have asked for. By the time you were in college, we had 12 units in Akron alone. By the time you got married, we had 36 units across Ohio and a small commercial property in Tampa. After your mother died, I kept building, because I didn't have anything else to do. Hal was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Which, in a way, was true. Why didn't you ever tell me? Trevor whispered. I looked at my son for a long time. I tried, son. 8-9 years ago, I told you I'd had a good run with some rental properties. Do you remember what you said? He didn't answer. You said congratulations, Dad, and the way people say it when they're not really listening. You changed the subject. You asked me about the Indians game. I tried again 2 years later, at Christmas. I told you I just bought a piece of land in Italy your mother had loved. Do you remember what Brittany said? Brittany had her hands flat on the table. She was looking at the bread basket. She said, I went on, she said, "Oh, Ed, that's nice," in that voice. And then she changed the subject too. So I stopped trying. I figured if you wanted to know me, you'd ask. And you never asked. Dad, you never asked, Trevor. In 36 years, you've never asked me a real question about my life that wasn't about what was wrong with me, or what I could do for you. Penelope, who hadn't moved from my side, said in her small, high voice, Daddy, why are you yelling at Grandpa? Trevor looked at her, then at me, then back at her. He sat down slowly in his chair. I'm not yelling, sweetheart, he said. He didn't look at her when he said it. Brittany, who had been silent for nearly a minute, finally found her voice. So what is this, then? What are you doing? Are you kicking us out? I took a sip of my espresso. No, I said. Your reservation is honored. You paying guests, just like any other guests this villa has hosted. You have the rooms you booked. You have the meals, the wine, the staff, the pool. Everything you paid for. You're welcome to enjoy your 2 weeks. With you here, she said flatly. With me here. In our villa. In my villa. She stared at me. The skim milk color was gone now. Her face was getting blotchy. I want a refund, she said. You're welcome to leave at any time, I said. Refunds are governed by the rental agreement you signed. It's available on the management company's website. Generally, partial refunds are not offered after check-in for stays under 30 days. Hal said, How much was this? Brittany didn't answer. How much was this, Brittany? He said again. 22,000, she said quietly. Euros? Hal went very still. You spent 22,000 euros, he said, on a villa for 2 weeks. Hal, not now. You told me the trip was costing 13,000. Hal. 22,000 euros is, what, $24,000? Dad, she snapped, in a voice I'd never heard her use with him before. Not now. I sipped my espresso. I let Maxwell take a piece of cornetto from my plate. Penelope was looking up at me with shining eyes, 8 years old and deeply confused, but also, I think, recognizing on some level that something important was happening. I'm going to spend the morning in the garden, I said, standing up and lifting Maxwell with me. Penny, would you like to come help me look for the cat? There's a tortoiseshell cat that lives in the olive grove. Her name is Stregastel that lives in the olive grove. Her name is Strega. Uep said. I held out my hand. She took it. Trev, I said, looking back at my son. We'll talk this evening, you and me, after the kids are in bed. I think we have a lot to catch up on. He nodded mute. I walked off the terrace with my grandchildren, one in each arm, leaving the 3 adults at the table in the silence of a marriage and a family that had just been split open at a seam they hadn't known was there. The thing about real revenge, the kind that matters, is that it isn't loud, it doesn't shout, it doesn't slap. It just sits there in the morning sun, drinking espresso, while the people who hurt you finally have to look at what they did. I spent the morning with my grandchildren. We found Strega. She let Penelope pick her up. We picked tomatoes from Donata's garden. Maxwell asked me in his small, careful voice if I was going to live here now, and I told him I didn't know yet, but that he could come visit any time, and his eyes got big and he nodded very seriously like we just made a treaty. Around 11, Brittany appeared at the edge of the olive grove. She was wearing a different dress, and she'd put on lipstick. The blotches were gone. "Ed," she said in the sugar voice. "Could we talk?" I handed Maxwell a basil leaf to smell. "Sure." She sat down on the stone bench under the fig tree. I sat down on the other end of it. "I owe you an apology," she said. I waited. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said. "About the trip. I should have included you. I see that now. It was hurtful." It was. I'd love it if we could start over. While we're here, really start over. As family. I looked at her. I let her sit in it. "Brittany," I said finally, "when did you decide you wanted to start over? Was it last week, when you told my son I wasn't worth the airfare? Was it Tuesday at dinner, when you laughed at my dead wife's pot roast? Or was it about 2 hours ago, when you found out I have money?" Her face did something complicated. "That's not, Ed. That's not fair." "It's perfectly fair," I said. "And it's not a fight." "I'm not angry, Brittany. I'm done being angry. I've been done being angry since I bought my plane ticket. I just want you to know that I see you. I've seen you the whole time. I just wasn't saying anything." She didn't answer. "You don't have to start over with me," I said. "I'm not asking for that. I'm here for 2.5 weeks, and so are you, and we can be civil. The kids should have a wonderful time. But you and I are not going to be playing some new chapter of friendship. You and I are going to be exactly what we've been, except now we'll both know what that is." She stood up. Her hands were shaking. "You're a cruel old man," she said. "No," I said quietly. "I'm a very, very kind old man who has finally figured out that kindness without limits is just an invitation." She walked away across the gravel. I sat with the kids under the fig tree for another 20 minutes. That evening, after the kids were in bed and Brittany had retreated to her room with a migraine, and Hal and Gloria had walked down to the village for Grappa, my son and I sat on the terrace alone. He'd been crying. I could tell from his eyes. "Mom would hate me," he said, before I'd even sat down. I sat down across from him. I poured us both a glass of the Vernaccia. "She wouldn't hate you," I said. "She'd be disappointed. There's a difference." "Dad, I don't even know where to start." "Start with the easy part. Why did you stop calling me?" He stared into the wine. "Brittany," he said. "That's not enough. She said you were depressing. After Mom died. She said being around you was hard, and the kids were picking up on it. She said it would be better for everyone if we kept things short, like planned visits, not just dropping by. And then it just got further and further, and I let it, because it was easier. Yes, Dad, I'm sorry, I know you are. Right now. The question is whether you'll still be sorry in October, when you're back home and your wife is talking again and the kids are in school and I'm just the old man in the ranch house. Are you going to be sorry then?" He didn't answer for a long time. "What do you want me to do?" he said. "I don't want anything," I said. "That's the part I think you've never understood. I have never wanted anything from you. Not a check, not a vacation, not a single thing. I have wanted you. That's it. I've wanted my son. I've wanted you to call me on Thursdays and ask how my week was. I've wanted you to come over on Saturdays and watch a ball game. I've wanted you to pick up the phone when I call you, instead of letting it go to voicemail and texting me back 2 days later. I've wanted to be in your life, and you've kept me out of it because your wife told you to and you didn't have the spine to say no. He flinched. That's harsh, Dad. It's true. Tell me it's not true. He didn't. I drank my wine. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I've already updated my estate. The trust is in place. Everything I have, the houses, the properties, all of it, is going to Penelope and Maxwell. None of it is going to you. Not because I'm punishing you. Because you don't know me, Trevor. You haven't known me in 15 years. And money you haven't earned a relationship with is just a windfall. I'm not leaving you a windfall. I'm leaving your children a future. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. And you and I were going to start over. Slowly. You're going to call me on Sundays. Real calls, not 3 minutes about traffic. You're going to come over once a month by yourself. No Brittany, no kids, just you. You're going to sit at my kitchen table and we're going to talk like a father and a son. And in a year, if you've shown me that you actually want me in your life, we'll see where we are. And if you haven't, then we'll see where we are then too. Okay, Dad. And one more thing. Yes. You were going to take a long, hard look at your marriage. I'm not telling you what to do about it. That's not my place. But that woman has been steering you away from your own father for a decade, and you let her. And the next time she tries to steer you somewhere, I think you should be standing up for yourself. You're going to have to make a choice. And I want you to know, no matter what choice you make, you will always be my son. Even when I'm angry at you. Even when I'm disappointed. You will always be my son. He cried then. Quietly, into his hands. The way men cry when they haven't done it in a long time and don't quite remember how. I sat with him. I didn't reach across the table. He needed to do this part by himself. After a while, he wiped his face on his sleeve and he said, Mom really loved this place. She did. Show me. Tomorrow. Show me what you guys saw when you bought it. Okay, son. Dad, I am so sorry. I know. The next morning I walked him through every room. I told him the story of the day Eleanor and I had come here for the first time, the way she'd cried in the kitchen, the way she'd said this was where she wanted to grow old. He listened. He asked questions. Real questions. The rest of the trip went the way a trip goes, when one major lie has been pulled out of a family like a splinter and a wound is bleeding. Awkward. Quiet at times. Tearful at others. Brittany barely spoke to me. She mostly stayed in her room or by the pool, on her phone, texting friends back home. Hal, oddly enough, started talking to me like a peer. He brought me a glass of Brunello on the third evening, sat down next to me, and asked me how I'd gotten started in real estate. I told him. He listened for 2 hours. The next morning, he asked me more questions. Toward the end of the trip, he said quietly, Ed, I owe you an apology. I let my daughter run her household, and I never asked the questions I should have asked. I'm going to start asking them. I told him I appreciated that. The kids had the time of their lives. Penelope got brown as a hazelnut. Maxwell learned 3 Italian words. They both fell in love with Strega the cat and Donata's homemade gelato. I taught Penelope how to pick basil. I taught Maxwell how to count to 10 in Italian. On the last morning, before the van came to take them to the airport, Trevor stood with me on the terrace and looked out over the olive grove. I'm going to call you Sunday, he said. I'll be home by Sunday. Okay. Then I'll call you Sunday. He hugged me. A real hug. The first real hug from my son in 9 years. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. That was 11 months ago. He has called me every Sunday since. Every single one. He missed 2 and called me on Mondays both times, apologized profusely, and rebooked. He comes over once a month by himself, sits at my kitchen table, and we talk. About Mom, mostly. About things he never asked about when she was alive. About his work, his fears, his marriage, which is a different story I'll tell another time, but I will say this. He is finding his spine. Slowly, bit by bit. Brittany and I are not friends. We are polite. We are civil. She has not apologized again, and I haven't asked her to. Some bridges don't get rebuilt. Some of them just get walked away from. Penelope wrote me a letter in November that I keep in my desk drawer next to Eleanor's notebook. It says, in 8-year-old handwriting, "Grandpa, I love you, and Itali was the best, and the cat is the best, and you are the best." There is a small drawing of Strega. There are 3 exclamation points after best. Maxwell calls me on Tuesday afternoons now. Trevor sets it up. Maxwell tells me about his day in a small, careful voice, and I tell him about mine, and we talk about dinosaurs. I am going back to the farmhouse this October, by myself, for 3 weeks. To paint the trim on the kitchen window the way Eleanor wanted it. To sit on the terrace in the cool evenings, to read. And next August, Penelope and Maxwell are coming with me. Trevor has already asked. Without Brittany. Just the 4 of us. He wants me to teach them Italian. He wants me to show them the farm down the hill where the pecorino comes from. He wants them to learn about their grandmother in the place she loved most. I said yes. I'm telling you this story because I think there are a lot of us out there. A lot of fathers, a lot of mothers, a lot of grandparents who have been quietly written out of our own families by people who decided we weren't valuable enough to keep close. And I want you to know 2 things. The first is that you don't have to scream. You don't have to fight. You don't have to make a scene. You can simply, quietly, decide that you have been too generous for too long and that the kindness you've been giving is going to start coming with conditions. Real ones. Not threats. Not punishments. Just the truth, finally said out loud. The second is that some of them will hear you. Not all of them. Mine almost didn't. But some of them will hear you, and they will come back. And the relationship that gets rebuilt on the other side of the truth is the only kind of relationship worth having anyway. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Tell me, if you're willing, whether you've ever had to set a boundary with your own family. I read every comment, and I'm always grateful for your stories. Click the box on the screen for the next story. There's another one waiting for you, and I think it might be the one you needed to hear today. I've thought a lot about that morning on the terrace since I came home. About the way Trevor's coffee cup hung suspended in the air when he saw me. About the silence that fell over Brittany like a curtain coming down. And the truth I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened to them was something I did to them. It was something they had been doing to themselves, slowly, for years. And I had simply been the only one absorbing the cost. The cause was set the moment Trevor decided that my love was a renewable resource that didn't require any tending. The cause was set every time Brittany was allowed to roll her eyes at the mother of the man she'd married, the woman whose recipes she ate without thanks, whose grandchildren she carried in her body. The cause was set in 1,000 small moments, where my son chose his comfort over his character. And the effect, when it finally came, was not cruelty. It was just the bill arriving for a meal they had been eating for a long time without paying. I think about my own role in it too, because here's the harder truth. I taught them this. I taught them by paying every check, by absorbing every slight, by making myself small enough to fit into whatever corner of their life they were willing to give me. Kindness without limits is not love. It's a kind of cowardice dressed up as virtue. Eleanor warned me once, gently, that I was too soft with the boy. I should have listened. If I could leave you with anything, it would be these 3 things, because they are what I had to learn the hard way at 67 years old. Be a person of decency, but understand that decency means telling the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even to the people you love most. The kindest thing I ever did for my son was finally let him see who I was and what he had been doing. Coddling him would have been cruelty in slow motion. Use your mind. Pay attention. The signs were there for years, and I refused to read them because reading them would have required me to act. Wisdom isn't just knowing things. It's having the courage to see what's actually in front of you instead of what you wish was there. And finally, be strong enough to set a limit, even when your hands are shaking. Strength isn't shouting. It isn't punishment. It's the quiet, terrifying decision to stop being available for your own diminishment. The night I called Stefano in Florence was the strongest thing I'd done in 2 decades, and I was sitting alone in a kitchen in Ohio in my pajamas. Strength looks like that more often than people admit. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that lets them walk all over you. You don't owe them silence. You don't owe them your endless forgiveness without change on their part. What you owe is honesty, and what you keep is your dignity. The rest, as I learned in a stone farmhouse in Tuscany, will sort itself out in its own time.